Good morning and welcome to Lake Country Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Michelle Jackson and my pronouns are she, her. I'm your worship leader this week. Welcome to this morning, this day, and this opportunity to be together in community, which is a time of joy, comfort, and sometimes challenge. This Unitarian Universalist congregation is a place where we come to learn more about being human. We're not here because we've figured out life's questions or because we think we've got it right. Welcome here to learn more about being in relationship together, how to listen, how to forgive, how to be vulnerable, and how to create trust and compassion in one another. I would like to welcome our guest speaker this morning, Philip Chard. Philip is a psychotherapist in private practice, specializing in health, psychology, and trauma treatment. He writes an award-winning weekly column titled Out of My Mind, previously in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel and now in the Shepherd Express, and authored 3 books, including The Healing Earth, which won the Midwest Publishers Award. Previously, he served as president and CEO of Empathia, a firm providing behavioral health solutions on an international basis. Prior to that, he was director of behavioral science education at Michigan State University's College of Human Medicine, where he was an associate professor and received the Outstanding Faculty Award. Wow, welcome.
Thank you. Morning. The first words are from Bob Samples. The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant, or I will add, should be. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. And the second is from Khalil Gibran, wrote The Prophet. When you reach the end of what you should know, you will be at the beginning of what you should sense.
Our first reading today is a quote by Anne Lamott. You get your intuition back when you make space for it, when you stop the chattering of the rational mind. The rational mind doesn't nourish you. You assume that it gives you truth because the rational mind is the golden calf that this culture worships. But this is not true. Rationality squeezes out much that is rich and juicy and fascinating. Here ends the first reading. Our second reading is a quote by Karen Marie Moning. I don't know where dreams come from. Sometimes I wonder if they're genetic memories or messages from something divine. Warnings, perhaps. Maybe we do come with an instruction booklet, but we're just too dense to read it because we've dismissed it as the irrational waste product of the rational mind. Sometimes I think all the answers we need are buried in our slumbering subconscious. The booklet is right here, and every night when we lay our heads down on the pillow, it flips open. The wise read it, heed it. The rest of us try as hard as we can upon awakening to forget any disturbing revelations we might have found there. Here ends the readings.
So when I woke up this morning, many of you probably had this experience. I had this song going in my head, and it wouldn't stop. And it's a song I don't think I've thought of in, 50 years. It was, "Give Me That Old-Time Religion." So I knew my subconscious was trying to tell me something. I wasn't quite sure what. But then I remembered a little bit later when I'd given a talk at a Unitarian church, in Unitarian Church North, and one of the ministers in the audience came up to me afterwards and said, you're pretty dry. You got to kind of vary your tone a little bit, pick up the pace. I think that's what old-time religion was telling me. Okay, so anyway, that's how it works sometimes. So in the film, which many of you may have seen, called The Bourne Identity, CIA assassin Jason Bourne, played by Matt Damon, is wounded and suffers complete amnesia. When he wakes up from his coma, he doesn't know who he is. where he is or how he got there. He possesses no conscious memories of anything that happened before he woke up. In his quest to discover his identity, he finds himself in a number of potentially lethal encounters with other assassins charged with eliminating him. When attacked, he reacts instinctively, displaying all the deadly skills of his trade. And despite the total absence of any conscious memories or defined identity, he still possesses a foundation of broad knowledge and refined skills. He knows how to talk, count change, brush his teeth, kick butt, but he doesn't know who he is. Bottom line, he doesn't need a fully functioning conscious mind to be an operational Homo sapiens. This story illustrates one of the primary distinctions between the conscious and subconscious minds. If Jason Bourne had consciously deliberated about how to defend himself, he would have been skewered right away. Like all of us, when operating on so-called instinct or reflex, his subconscious mind was in charge, and due to prior learning, knew exactly what to do and how to do it. The mind is tricameral, meaning it operates on three primary levels. First is the conscious mind, which is a thin veneer atop a vast psychological sea. It's responsible for our sense of self or ego. It usually regards itself as in charge, as the central figure in one's conscious experience. Next is the motivational subconscious, aspects of which are discoverable by the conscious mind, but often go unrecognized. It is a repository of emotions, motives, biases, creativity, insights, spiritual beliefs, intuitions, and a vast library of memories, knowledge, and skills acquired over a lifetime. Then there is the unconscious, sometimes described as the non-conscious machine, which is not discoverable. It regulates a wide variety of autonomic physiological processes like circadian rhythms, metabolic fluctuations and hormonal ones, visual and auditory processing, and countless other physical events required for bodily homeostasis. Carl Jung, the famous psychoanalyst, believed in yet another layer of mind called the collective unconscious, a spiritual realm where all humans share in an essential connection with each other and the so-called ground of being. Evidence in support of his premise resides in the common symbols and archetypes that permeate all human cultures, including archaic ones. And more recently, at Princeton University, there was an ongoing study, discontinued in 2016, called the Global Consciousness Project, that found some empirical evidence supporting Jung's hypothesis. However, for our purposes today, we will focus on what I call the other mind, which is largely the province of the motivational subconscious. While neurons occur throughout the body, including extensively in the heart and the GI tract, hence the term gut feelings, our brains are a central hub of consciousness. Whether the brain creates consciousness or merely channels it remains open to debate. However, we do know that the human brain is among the most complex structures in the universe. The average brain harbors about 90 billion neurons, and each one is connected to and able to communicate with as many as 10,000 others, meaning your brain has roughly 100 trillion synaptic connections, affording you a processing speed of about a billion calculations per second. This makes me sound like Carl Sagan, billions and billions and billions. Estimates are the brain may be able to store up to 1,000 terabytes of memory. For purposes of comparison, all 19 million volumes in the Library of Congress can be stored in a mere 10 terabytes. Given the storage capacity and computational speed of the brain, it should come as little wonder that the conscious mind can monitor only a minuscule fraction of one's mental activity. While the estimates vary, neuroscience suggests the conscious mind participates in less than 5% of cognitive processing occurring in one's psyche. The remaining 95% or more is the province of the other minds, including the motivational subconscious, the one we mostly ignore. So let's bring it home. Right now, I'm talking to two minds inside of your heads. One of them, the conscious one, may be listening, having thoughts of its own, or it could be distracted with other ideas, memories, or visualizations. There was a Harvard study recently that showed most of us are distracted 47% of the time, which means about half of you have already left the building. The other mind, the subconscious one, however, is definitely listening, but also remains busy with all sorts of other activities. What's more, it's listening for more than the meaning of my words. It is listening for how it feels about me as a person. Am I friend or foe? Wise or foolish? Kind or indifferent? Your subconscious mind made that decision within 15 seconds of me getting up and starting to talk. Now, in my psychotherapy practice, I strive to speak with both the client's conscious mind and their motivational subconscious. And in addressing the former, I communicate using its preferred language, words, concepts, reasoning, abstract ideas. In contrast, when interacting with the motivational subconscious, I employ stories, anecdotes, metaphors, symbols, figurative language such as poetry, even rituals and art and music, because that's the language it speaks. Rather than being literal or linear, the other mind is figurative and holographic. It responds to a different kind of communication and divergent levels of meaning. While the conscious mind may fail to recognize figurative messages, the subconscious one does not. It's always picking them up. So for the most part, human communication is kind of this ilk. We interact with each other and the world on two levels, but are generally only aware of doing so on one. When we talk to each other, our respective conscious minds remain engaged by the images and ideas hidden in our emotional and observational terms. Nonetheless, it is the judgments and influence of the subconscious that determines how we feel about each other, and in many instances, how we behave toward each other. You may remember that famous quote from Maya Angelou: "People may forget what you said, they may forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you make them feel." And that's what the subconscious is monitoring. There's just too much happening inside and outside of our minds for the conscious brain to handle. In fact, short-term memory, which is the workhorse of conscious thought, can only hang on to about 5 to 9 individual bits of information at any given time. Things like a phone number, a few items on a grocery list, a short quotation, and so on. However, your subconscious mind can readily multitask, handling huge volumes of incoming sensory and cognitive information simultaneously. Those who attempt to consciously engage in multitasking only succeed in what I call multi-distracting, meaning rapidly hopping from one focus to another, not really juggling 2 or more activities at once. Now, it's customary for the conscious mind to believe and act as if it's running the show. It imagines it's making the decisions, solving the problems, gaining insights, crafting innovations, and that it forms the foundation of one's identity. However, this perspective is largely delusional. It is the other mind that is at the helm of our ship of life, so it is the master, not the servant. You're on the team, but you ain't captain. There is strong and growing body of research showing that subconscious biases, what we call scripts, and conditioning, called priming, have a powerful and persuasive impact on conscious cognition. Let's look at a few examples of this. In a study at Yale, psychologists were able to alter a person's judgment of a stranger's personality by handing them one of 2 types of coffee. While holding a cup of iced coffee, people rated the stranger as less sociable, more emotionally cold, and selfish. When given a hot cup of coffee, people's ratings of strangers reversed, calling them warm and engaging. In this study, the subjects had no idea their judgments were shaped by a cup of coffee, a subconscious bias. In other research, when people were exposed to a faint odor of cleaning liquid in the air in their workplace, they were more meticulous and tidier in their workspaces. Another example is racial bias. Even when the conscious self believes and asserts acceptance of other racial groups, subconscious scripts may prove otherwise, showing up in instinctive fear responses, biased voting patterns sometimes, and differences in how we relate to each other. In all these instances, the subject's behaviors were altered due to biases operating outside their awareness. Stereotypes, as we know, are familiar or social beliefs imprinted on the motivational subconscious, often at a young age, where they subsequently operate outside of one's awareness. As Eric Leventhal reminded us, I always have my reasons, even when I don't know what they are. While these effects can be startling, they don't compare to other research showing that so-called conscious decision-making is largely a myth. Our decisions are primarily the province of the other mind, the motivational subconscious. When a decision emerges in conscious thought, oh, I decided this, we experience ourselves as having made it in an act of free will. In fact, we are only becoming aware of a decision already made by the other mind. And this has been demonstrated, by the way, through neuroscientific brain scans. You may have heard of the term executive function, which is applied to the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the conscious mind, which is this layer of cerebral tissue right behind your forehead. It's behind my forehead, too. The term executive function implies that this part of the mind is in charge of making decisions. In fact, neuroscience shows it can be one of the last neural areas in the brain to know when a decision has been made. But it still feels like I decided. What this means is that decision-making is a bottom-up process in the tricameral mind, and the conscious mind is sort of at the end of that list. Subconscious influences drive many of our behaviors, not just decisions. When behavioral scientists ask this question, to what extent are we aware of and able to report on the true causes of our behavior? Their answer is, not much. Fair enough, but how do subconscious biases and inclinations that shape our behavior come into being? Again, the process is called priming, or in the rest of the animal world, imprinting. Priming begins soon after birth. We see it in the ability of infants to engage in imitative behavior. Structures in the brain called mirror neurons execute this function. As we grow, we learn to behave through imitation and modeling. And most of this learning occurs outside conscious awareness. And over time, priming creates a kind of behavioral guidance system that operates largely without the conscious mind's participation. We experience this system as our preferences, and research shows these preferences, or biases, link directly with the neurological mechanisms that drive our behavior. In other words, the subconscious is the primary determinant of our behavior. Not one's will, motivation, intellect, or intentionality. In nature, the subconscious mind, often called instinct, is the rule rather than the exception. We are far less removed from this reality than we assume. Many of the conflicts, hypocrisies, and dysfunctions that plague us are a consequence of the battle between subconscious preferences, often unseen, and other conscious efforts to hide, deny, or disable them. For example, someone might harbor a forbidden desire created through priming in childhood. If this desire is not acceptable to the conscious mind because of, say, fear of shaming or conflict with one's moral values, its emergence into awareness or manifestation in our behavior creates an internal conflict. And as many of us have experienced in wrestling with challenges like overeating or obsessive worrying, jealousy, guilt, and all the like, the conscious mind's ability to assert control over subconscious perceptions and scripts is very limited. The primacy of the other mind presents an interesting conundrum for the conscious self. In order to promote a degree of mental homeostasis, the conscious mind should actively pursue a collaborative relationship with the motivational subconscious. Absent that liaison, dysfunctional internal conflicts and unwanted behaviors prove more difficult to handle. Imagine an ant on the back of an elephant. No matter how much the ant wants to walk in one direction, if the elephant's going the other way, the ant's actions are futile. In kind, we cannot move in the direction of our conscious goals, like the ant, if they fail to align with those of the motivational subconscious, the elephant. The good news, I'm going to give you a little, is that it is possible for the conscious mind to become more aware of the other mind, and in doing so, develop a collaborative relationship with it. I gave you a little example of that this morning. A song in my head. I didn't understand it. The conscious mind was going, what is that there for? But after I spent some time dwelling on it, contemplating it, getting in touch with that part of my mind, it gave me the answer. We can do this, but the question is how? There are a number of paths in these regards, and one of these is hypnosis. Those of us who are highly hypnotizable, which is about 20% of the population, can easily enter what is called a hypnagogic state of awareness. This is characterized by dreamlike imagery, altered physical sensations, spontaneous insights, long-buried memories, sometimes even archetypal visions and figures, meaning the realm of the other mind. Now, another 20% of us prove incapable of being hypnotized, while the remainder of us fall somewhere in the middle. What determines hypnotizability? It appears wired into the brain, not learned. So if you're out there thinking, I could never be hypnotized, or if you're out there thinking, well, I'd go right under, you could actually be very wrong about that. I've had people come in my office and say, I'll be an easy subject. No. I've had other people come in and say, there's no way I'm going under, and off they go. So we just can't really tell by asking ourselves. However, hypnosis aside, a similar mental state is achieved through deep meditation, sometimes also through chanting or rhythmic dance or other ritual actions, all of which are designed to kind of turn off the conscious mind and let the subconscious bubble up to the surface where we do have some contact with it. Also, certain hallucinogenic substances, such as psilocybin, which you've heard about, peyote, LSD, and others, can also help people access this form of the subconscious, although it is best done with competent guidance. Psychotherapy with hallucinogens, called psychedelic-assisted therapy, is increasingly accepted now as a valid treatment that taps into the subconscious mind. Clinical trials are underway in several universities, and data has been submitted to the CDC seeking authorization to use psychedelic-assisted therapy to treat conditions like post-traumatic stress disorder, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and major depressive disorder, among others. Why does it work? Because it shuts down the conscious mind, which can often interfere with the healing and insight development process and allows the subconscious to surface. In a different realm, some forms of journaling open doorways to the other mind. Most utilized among these is something called expressive writing. which involves recording one's stream of consciousness. You've all seen the stereotype of the patient laying on the couch in the psychiatrist's office and the psychiatrist sitting there writing away as they talk about whatever. That's stream of consciousness, and that comes right out of the subconscious mind. Also, writing down one's dreams in a journal affords glimpses into the other mind as well, although dream interpretation by the conscious self is often a murky business. In working with dreams, it might be helpful to remember what Ursula Le Guin noted, quote, "Some dreams tell us what we wish to believe. Some tell us what we fear. Some dreams are what we know, though we may not know that we know. And the rarest dream tells us what we have not known, but need to." Another vehicle in getting in touch with the subconscious is in something called persona journaling. Here, one conducts a written dialogue between the conscious mind and a shadowy aspect of the motivational subconscious, such as an impulse or a need or a symptom, physical or psychological, that is in conflict with the conscious mind's agenda. Helping these warring parties communicate in writing often reduces or resolves the inner tug of war. Using my prior example, this requires that the ant and elephant use dialogue to find a mutually agreeable direction to pursue. Interestingly, this idea for persona journaling came from Benjamin Franklin. Out of frustration, he conducted a written dialogue between his conscious mind and his gout. He actually published a little short work called Dialogue Between Franklin and the Gout. And when he did this, interestingly enough, his conscious mind was into this, "Why are you persecuting me? Why are you making this happen?" And his gout answered back, "Well, you're doing all the wrong things, buddy. You're eating the wrong stuff. You're drinking too much. You're not exercising," that kind of thing. So this dialogue actually opened up his mind to ways he could help himself. Also, many expressive and creative mediums afford access to the other mind. When artists, for example, become fully absorbed in their work, as painting, music, writing, sculpting, you name it, they are creating a dance between the conscious mind and its subconscious muse. As renowned animator Hayao Miyazaki said, "I try to dig deep into the well of my subconscious. At a certain moment in that process, the lid is opened and very different ideas and visions are liberated." Artists draw from the other mind to make creative resources available to the conscious self. In addition, art, music, and dance therapy are now considered very effective pathways into the subconscious realm and are increasingly used in psychotherapy. What's more, the conscious mind can work directly with the motivational subconscious to encourage good decision-making. When we sleep on it, it being a problem or a decision we have to make, we afford the subconscious mind time to come up with its own solution, one based on far more knowledge than that available to the conscious psyche. Seeding the other mind with intentional thoughts or images right before we fall asleep is a way to support this process, a process called transderivational search. This is a wonderful example of what my profession does to people all the time, which is tell you things you already know in words you can't understand. But basically, that's just the subconscious mind working while your conscious mind is asleep. It's on duty and it's working the decision. I'll give you a couple of quick examples of that. When Einstein was struggling with the math for his general theory of relativity, his conscious mind just could not get it to work. And one night he went to bed thinking about the problem, which is a kind of seeding of the subconscious. And that night he had that famous dream where he saw himself riding through the universe on a beam of light. And when he woke up, he had the answer to the equation. He went to the board, and there you have it, the theory of relativity. Who thought it up? Not his conscious mind. I'll give you another more current example. When President Obama was considering whether or not to authorize the strike that was supposed to take out bin Laden, at the very end of his briefing, he asked his advisors, what's the chance he's actually in that building? And they said, 50-50. And they said, what's your decision, Mr. President? And he said, I'll tell you in the morning. Went to sleep, slept on it, got up, gave the order. We can use the subconscious mind to help us grapple with tough decisions and come up with answers. The mind does some of its best thinking when we aren't there. In a therapeutic context, approaches such as cognitive behavioral therapy, which you hear a lot about, makes the conscious mind aware of subconscious generated self-talk that drives emotions and behaviors. However, psychodynamic therapy, the kind developed by Freud and Jung and some others, often maligned as old school, is also highly effective at unmasking subconscious scripts and preferences. So, where do these new understandings leave us? The bottom line is this. The part of us we identify as me is not truly in charge. This can have disturbing implications for philosophical and real-life issues surrounding things like free will, accountability, guilt, decision-making, and personal responsibility. To date, public discourse and policy continues to operate on the premise that the conscious self is the master of one's actions. Neuroscience is providing compelling evidence challenging that presumption. The overriding challenge, then, is to make our conscious minds more aware and conversant with the powerful aspects of the other mind. Doing so helps integrate our disparate psychological selves or parts, personas, into a more cohesive and unified psyche. We got a long way to go in this regard, but as our knowledge of who we really are and what actually drives our actions becomes more refined, we may transform into more enlightened beings. Let's hope so. If these efforts prove successful, we may spare ourselves the self-destruction that now seems to threaten our species. As Eric Leventhal said, the closer you come to knowing that you alone create the world of your experience, the more vital it becomes for you to discover just who is doing that creating. And that who is your other mind. In our closing words, by embracing your subconscious, you gain a different way of seeing and experiencing, an expanded perception that opens a doorway, not only to dreams, but also to the mythic dimensions. As in dreams, you see yourself or others with new eyes. Your senses awaken and grasp and experience more fully than ever before. Suddenly, you find your ears are open to hear with a deeper understanding. For our benediction, a quote from Jacob Nordby. You know that crazy heart of yours? The one with lightning crackling and moonlight shining through it? The one you've been told not to trust because it often led you off the beaten path? The one so many have misunderstood your entire life? Trust it, feed it, grow it. It's your greatest treasure and will point the way to your highest destiny. It is the voice of your soul.